Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be stepping into a moment that continues to fascinate and frustrate, the JFK assassination. You've given us a really interesting mix of materials to work with this time, including some thought-provoking pieces from the Fair Play magazine, which focuses specifically on assassination research. So we'll be trying to unearth some of the key facts and lingering mysteries around this event.
What's striking about this case is that even decades later, it feels like a puzzle with missing pieces. The Warren Commission's lone gunman theory has been challenged over and over, and the sources you've provided definitely add to those challenges.
Yeah, one of the most debated pieces of evidence is the infamous paper bag, which Oswald supposedly used to carry the rifle into the Texas schoolbook depository. The Warren Commission really leaned on this as proof of the lone gunman theory.
It was crucial for their narrative. If Oswald didn't bring the rifle in, their entire case starts to crumble. What's interesting here is that the Fair Play articles highlight several issues with the paper bag evidence.
Right off the bat, there are 0 photographs of this bag at the crime scene. You'd think something so central to the case would have been thoroughly documented.
It's a pretty glaring omission, and it gets even more peculiar when you factor in the detective, Robert Lee Studebaker, who drew an outline of the bag on a photograph.
The catch is, he only did that after an FBI agent and a Warren Commission lawyer prompted him. It almost feels like they were trying to steer him towards a specific conclusion.
Yeah, it does. This raises the question of confirmation bias. Were investigators so set on the lone gunman theory that they might have overlooked, or even worse, manipulated evidence that didn't fit?
Speaking of questionable witness accounts, let's look at Buell Wesley Frazier. He gave Oswald a ride to work that morning and claimed Oswald said he was going home to get curtain rods. That statement became a linchpin for the prosecution.
Right, it's a pivotal detail. But the Fair Play articles bring up contradictions from other witnesses, including Oswald's own wife, Marina. They said Oswald never mentioned curtain rods, plus his room already had them.
It makes you wonder about the pressures witnesses faced at the time. Imagine being thrust into the spotlight of such a high-profile investigation. Could that have influenced their testimonies?
It's certainly possible. The weight of public scrutiny, the fear of being implicated, even the desire to help solve the case. These could all have played a role. And in Frazier's case, there's evidence suggesting he might have been coached before testifying.
And then there's his sister, Linnie Mae Randall, whose testimony about the paper bag basically echoes her brother's. It adds another layer of doubt to their accounts.
The Fair Play analysis takes it a step further, suggesting the bag itself might have been made from materials found inside the depository. This opens the door to the possibility that someone planted it.
So we have no photos, conflicting witness statements,
Yeah.
and a detective prompted to draw the bag's outline. It really casts doubt on whether this paper bag even existed in the first place.
That's a valid point. And if the paper bag is unreliable, what does that mean for the lone gunman theory? This is where things get really captivating. The Fair Play articles delve into some alternative theories and potential suspects.
And these theories go way beyond just a lone gunman. We're talking connections between Oswald and figures like David Atlee Phillips and George de Morenschau, both with links to intelligence agencies.
These connections are particularly intriguing because they raise the possibility that forces beyond Oswald might have been at play. It's like peeling back layers of a complex onion.
Exactly. And there are even bolder suggestions involving some seriously powerful people. Lyndon B. Johnson, anti-Castro activists, organized crime figures, even Texas oil interests. It's like a who's who of influential figures at the time.
The Fair Play articles point to a chilling detail about a meeting the night before the assassination, involving figures like Clint Murchison, J. Edgar Hoover, and John McCloy afterward. LBJ allegedly told his mistress that the Kennedys wouldn't be bothering him anymore.
That detail definitely sends chills down your spine. It raises so many questions. What was the nature of that meeting? What kind of power did these individuals hold? Could this be more than just a coincidence?
It's impossible to ignore this kind of detail. We have to acknowledge that powerful people sometimes operate in ways that are hidden from public view. The sources here aren't necessarily endorsing any specific theory, but they encourage us to consider all possibilities.
Especially since there's evidence of potential government obstruction and suppressed evidence, adding another layer of mystery to the whole thing.
One of the most blatant examples is the missing audio tapes of President Johnson's phone conversations right after the assassination. Those tapes could offer crucial insights into his reactions and decisions during those critical hours.
The official line is that these tapes were lost or accidentally erased. But come on, it's hard to believe that such crucial recordings could just vanish.
It does strain credulity, doesn't it? This feeds into the suspicion that there is a deliberate attempt to keep certain information from the public eye.
And then there's the limited access to the materials William Manchester used for his book, Death of a President. Johnson himself commissioned this book, but then restricted access to the research behind it. It feels intentionally secretive.
Yeah. If we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, this suggests a desire to control the narrative surrounding the assassination. Maybe certain aspects revealed in Manchester's research were deemed too sensitive to make public.
It raises the question, is this less about what happened in Dallas and more about how that event has been interpreted and presented ever since?
That's a great point. The JFK assassination has become a battleground of competing narratives. The Warren Commission's official story has been challenged by countless researchers and alternative theories, and this suppressed evidence only adds fuel to the fire.
It's like they created a void that's been filled with speculation and conspiracy theories.
And then there's the issue of withheld records from foreign governments, especially those related to Oswald's time in the Soviet Union, Japan, and Mexico. This is where it gets even more complex. These records could potentially shed light on Oswald's connections to foreign intelligence agencies or other groups that might have had a reason to target Kennedy, but they remain shrouded in secrecy.
Every time we peel back a layer, it seems like we uncover another mystery. It's a good thing there have been groups, like the Assassination Records Review Board, or ARRB, fighting for transparency and the release of these records.
The ARRB was instrumental in bringing to light a lot of previously hidden documents. They faced pushback from agencies like the FBI, CIA, and the military, who were understandably reluctant to release information they considered sensitive.
It feels like a constant tug of war between the public's right to know and the government's desire to protect certain information.
Absolutely. And this tension is central to the debate surrounding the JFK assassination. How do we balance the need for transparency with the need for national security? Where do we draw the line?
This brings us to another crucial point. What exactly constitutes an assassination record? It seems simple on the surface, but as with everything in this case, the details get messy.
The ARRB grappled with whether to include physical artifacts, like the rifle, the paper bag we discussed, even the president's clothing. These are all tangible pieces of evidence directly tied to the assassination.
So why wouldn't they be considered assassination records? They seem more important than some random memos buried in an archive.
Many researchers and members of the public argued for a broader interpretation, but initially, the National Archives pushed back, sticking to a more traditional definition of records as written documents. It was a bit of a bureaucratic roadblock.
This brings us to the public hearings held by the ARRB, which were incredibly insightful. These hearings included testimonies from individuals who knew Oswald personally, had expertise in specific areas of the case, or conducted their own investigations.
One particularly compelling testimony came from Priscilla Johnson McMillan, who actually knew Oswald during his time in the Soviet Union.
She had a unique perspective on Oswald's personality and motivations, offering insights you wouldn't find in official reports or secondhand accounts.
We also heard from Richard Trask, an expert in photographic evidence. He shed light on the difficulties of authenticating and interpreting photos and films from the assassination, especially when every detail is scrutinized for potential manipulation or misinterpretation.
And then there was Dick Russell, an investigative journalist, who had been digging into potential conspiracies for years. He talked about his efforts to track down individuals with inside knowledge, highlighting the importance of persistent investigation and following the evidence wherever it leads.
These ARRB hearings were like mini deep dives in themselves, each witness bringing a different piece of the puzzle to the table.
It's a shame that the ARRB eventually concluded its work, because it feels like there's still so much to uncover. But their legacy continues in the documents they brought to light and the questions they raised.
Their efforts paved the way for further research and investigation, and they set a precedent for transparency and accountability. That remains relevant even today. It's fascinating how these hearings brought together such a range of viewpoints and expertise, forcing us to confront the gaps in our knowledge and the limitations of historical inquiry.
It's a good reminder that even with mountains of evidence and years of research, some mysteries might never be fully solved. And that brings us back to some of the specific examples of withheld documents and the justifications given for their continued secrecy. It's a bit like a game of cat and mouse between researchers and those holding the information.
The case of the missing audio tapes of President Johnson's phone conversations immediately after the assassination is particularly perplexing. Those tapes could contain crucial details about his reactions and the decisions made during a very sensitive period.
The explanation given, that the tapes were either lost or accidentally erased, feels incredibly convenient. It's hard to fathom that such critical recordings could simply disappear.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? This lack of transparency fuels the suspicions that there's a deliberate effort to keep certain aspects of the story hidden.
And then there's the restricted access to William Manchester's research materials for Death of a President.
Right.
Why would Johnson commission a book and then make the research behind it so difficult to access?
If we connect this to the wider context, it suggests a desire to shape the narrative surrounding the assassination. Perhaps certain aspects of the story, as revealed in Manchester's research, were deemed too sensitive or potentially damaging to release to the public.
So it's not just about what happened in Dallas, but also about how the event has been framed and presented to the public ever since.
Precisely. The JFK assassination has become a battleground for competing narratives. The official story, as presented by the Warren Commission, has been challenged by countless researchers and alternative theories. The suppressed evidence only adds more fuel to this fire.
It's like they created a vacuum, and that vacuum has been filled with speculation and conspiracy theories.
That's a key point, the lack of clear answers, and the sense that information is being withheld create fertile ground for alternative explanations to take root.
And it's not just domestic records that are shrouded in secrecy. There's the issue of withheld records from foreign governments, especially those related to Oswald's time in the Soviet Union, Japan, and Mexico.
These records could potentially unlock a whole new dimension of the case. They might reveal Oswald's connections to foreign intelligence agencies or other groups with motives to target Kennedy. But for now, those connections remain speculative.
The Fair Play articles dive into some of the more prominent conspiracy theories, connecting Oswald to various groups and figures, intelligence agencies, anti-Castro activists, organized crime, even Texas oil interests. It's almost overwhelming. Where do you even begin to sort through all of this?
It's essential to approach these theories with a critical eye. Not every claim of a conspiracy is credible or supported by solid evidence, but it's equally important not to dismiss them outright.
So how do we find that balance between healthy skepticism and open-mindedness? It feels like walking a tightrope.
One way is to focus on the evidence presented. What are the specific claims being made? What evidence is offered to support those claims? Does that evidence hold up under scrutiny? The Fair Play articles, while presenting alternative theories, don't necessarily endorse any specific one.
I appreciate that approach. It feels more like they're giving us the tools to do our own analysis and reach our own conclusions.
Exactly. They're encouraging critical thinking and engagement with the material, which is ultimately what a deep dive like this is all about.
We've talked a lot about suppressed evidence and the challenges of getting a clear picture of what happened. But what about the evidence that is available? Do any of these alternative theories presented in Fair Play seem particularly compelling to you?
One theory that I find particularly intriguing involves the potential role of anti-Castro Cuban exiles. The sources highlight Kennedy's shifting stance on Cuba, his attempts to find a diplomatic solution, and the Bay of Pigs fiasco. These actions alienated some powerful figures within the anti-Castro movement.
And those individuals might have seen Kennedy as a liability or even a traitor to their cause. It's certainly a motive that warrants further investigation.
Exactly. The sources also mention connections between Oswald and individuals linked to the anti-Castro movement, as well as his trip to Mexico City just months before the assassination, where he allegedly met with Cuban and Soviet officials.
It's like all these pieces of the puzzle are scattered on the table. We're trying to figure out how they fit together. But some pieces are missing, and some might not even belong to the same puzzle.
That's a brilliant analogy, and it highlights the frustration and allure of the JFK assassination. Even with all the available information, there's a sense that we're still just scratching the surface.
It's a good reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's often nuanced, messy, and full of unanswered questions. And that's particularly true for an event as complex and controversial as the JFK assassination.
What stands out to you from our exploration of these Fair Play articles? Is there a specific detail, theory, or piece of evidence that has particularly captured your attention?
Honestly, it's the sheer number of potential players involved. That I find most intriguing. We're not just talking about a lone gunman. We're talking about intelligence agencies, organized crime, political figures, even foreign governments.
It's a real-life thriller with a cast of characters that could rival any Hollywood blockbuster. And the stakes couldn't be higher. The assassination of a young, charismatic president at the height of the Cold War.
It's hard not to feel a sense of awe and unease when you consider the potential reach and influence of these various groups. Were they working together? Were they at odds with each other? Or was Oswald truly a lone wolf, acting on his own accord? These are the questions that keep me coming back to this case.
And those questions are exactly what make this case so enduringly fascinating. It's a puzzle with pieces that seem to constantly shift and change as we learn more.
Even with all the evidence that's been uncovered, there are still significant gaps in our understanding.
The missing audio tapes, the restricted access to Manchester's research materials, the withheld foreign government records, these all represent crucial missing pieces of the puzzle.
It's frustrating to think that there might be crucial information out there that we're still not privy to.
This brings us to a fundamental question about the nature of historical truth. Can we ever truly know what happened, even with access to all the available information?
It's a question that has plagued historians and philosophers for centuries. But I think the JFK assassination highlights the importance of continuing to search for answers, even when the trail seems cold.
Absolutely. The quest for truth is a journey, not a destination. And even if we never uncover every detail or find definitive answers to all the lingering questions, the process of searching can be incredibly enlightening. It can reveal hidden connections, challenge our assumptions, and broaden our understanding of history.
The ARB might have concluded its work, but their efforts paved the way for further research and investigation.
Their legacy lives on in the documents they uncovered and the questions they raised, and their work underscores the importance of transparency and accountability in government, especially when dealing with events of such a magnitude and historical significance.
Speaking of the ARB, I want to circle back to their public hearings. They really were fascinating and insightful, offering diverse perspectives on the case.
Those hearings were like mini trials in themselves, with each witness bringing their unique expertise and insights to the table. It was a rare opportunity to hear directly from individuals who knew Oswald personally, had analyzed specific aspects of the evidence, or conducted their own independent investigations.
One of the testimonies that stood out to me was from Priscilla Johnson McMillan. She actually knew Oswald during his time in the Soviet Union and offered a personal perspective on his character and motivations. It's not something you'd find in an official report.
Her testimony humanized Oswald in a way that's often missing from the official narrative. It reminded us that he was a complex individual with his own beliefs, desires, and frustrations.
We also heard from Richard Trask, a photographic evidence expert, who emphasized the challenges of authenticating and interpreting images and films related to the assassination.
In a case where every detail is scrutinized and debated, the reliability of visual evidence is paramount. Trask's insights were crucial in understanding the potential for manipulation or misinterpretation of those images.
And then there's Dick Russell, the investigative journalist. His testimony highlighted the importance of persistent investigation, following leads wherever they might take you, and not being afraid to challenge the official narrative.
His work exemplifies the spirit of independent inquiry and the pursuit of truth, no matter how difficult or controversial the path may be.
These ARB hearings were like windows into the investigative process, showing us the meticulous work that goes into piecing together a complex historical event.
They also demonstrated the importance of considering multiple perspectives and the value of bringing together diverse voices and expertise. It's through the accumulation of these different viewpoints that we can begin to form a more complete, albeit complex, understanding of the JFK assassination.
It's a shame that the ARB eventually wrapped up its work. I feel like there's still so much to uncover.
Their work, however, had a lasting impact. It not only deepened our understanding of the JFK assassination, but also set a precedent for transparency and accountability in government. The ARB's efforts continue to inspire researchers and journalists to dig deeper, ask tough questions, and challenge the status quo.
And it reminds us that the quest for truth is an ongoing process, one that requires vigilance, critical thinking, and a willingness to question even the most established narratives. It's about piecing together a puzzle that might never be fully complete, but the act of searching for those missing pieces can be incredibly rewarding.
And sometimes the most valuable discoveries come not from finding the answers, but from understanding the questions themselves.
It's amazing how much ground we've covered, and yet I still feel like we've only scratched the surface. The JFK assassination is such a layered and complex event, and every piece of information seems to lead to more questions.
That's the nature of this case, isn't it? It's like an intricate puzzle box, where each layer you unlock reveals another even more intricate layer beneath. And as we've seen, some of those layers are deliberately hidden from view.
One of the things that continues to strike me is the sheer number of potential suspects and motives presented in the Fair Play articles. It's almost like a tapestry, woven from threads of political intrigue, international espionage, and personal vendettas.
The Warren Commission's lone gunman theory, with Oswald acting in isolation, feels almost simplistic when you consider the web of connections and potential conspiracies presented in these sources.
We've got intelligence agencies with their secret operations and agendas, organized crime with its reach into the corridors of power, political figures with their own ambitions and rivalries, and even foreign governments with their own interests to protect.
It's a reminder that history is rarely straightforward. There are often hidden agendas, backroom deals, and power struggles happening beneath the surface of events.
And in the case of the JFK assassination, those hidden currents seem particularly strong. It's almost like we're looking at a snapshot of a moment where those currents converged, creating a perfect storm that led to tragedy.
The Fair Play articles do a good job of presenting those different threads and potential motives. Whether it was Kennedy's evolving stance on Cuba, his conflicts with the CIA, his efforts to de-escalate the Vietnam War, or his attempts to rein in the Federal Reserve, there were powerful individuals and groups who might have seen him as a threat to their interests.
It's not just about piecing together a timeline of events. It's about understanding the motivations and power dynamics that were at play. It's about grasping the complexities of a world on the brink of nuclear war, where Cold War tensions and domestic anxieties were intertwined.
And that's what makes this case so challenging and so compelling. It's not just a historical puzzle, it's a reflection of the political and social forces that shaped the 20th century.
It's also a reminder of the importance of critical thinking and questioning official narratives. As we've seen, evidence can be manipulated, information can be suppressed, and history can be rewritten to serve the interests of those in power.
The JFK assassination serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us that even in a democracy, the truth can be elusive, and the pursuit of justice can be long and arduous.
It's been quite a journey exploring these sources with you. What stands out as the most significant takeaway for you from our deep dive into the JFK assassination?
For me, it's the enduring power of unanswered questions. The JFK assassination is a case that continues to fascinate, frustrate, and inspire in equal measure. It's a testament to the human desire to seek truth, to understand the past, and to hold those in power accountable.
I completely agree. It's a case that forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge, the complexities of history, and the fragility of truth itself.
It's a story that continues to evolve as new information comes to light and new perspectives emerge. It's a story that will likely continue to be debated and analyzed for generations to come.
And that perhaps is the most profound lesson of all. The JFK assassination is not just a historical event, it's a living narrative, one that we are all still actively shaping through our ongoing search for answers and meaning.
It's a reminder that history is not static or fixed. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving process, shaped by the questions we ask, the evidence we uncover, and the interpretations we construct.
It's been an absolute pleasure exploring these materials with you. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise.
The pleasure was all mine. It's always rewarding to engage in a deep dive like this, especially with someone who shares the same passion for uncovering the truth.
And to you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to delve further into the mysteries surrounding the JFK assassination. It's a case that offers endless avenues for exploration and contemplation.
Remember, history is not just something we read about in textbooks. It's a living, breathing entity that shapes our world and challenges us to grapple with complex questions about power, truth, and justice.
Keep those questions coming. Keep exploring and never stop searching for answers. Until next time.